Hi, my name is Alex Dolphin, and welcome back to another episode of Ex Ante. Today we're going to discuss the case Akorn versus Fresenius. This case is heard in the Delaware Court of Chancery in 2018. Let's go ahead and jump into the facts of the case. So this is a merger. Akorn is being purchased by Fresenius. Akorn is an American company that produces generic drugs, so generic pharmaceuticals. And Fresenius is a German company. It's just a large German pharmaceutical company with subsidiaries in the United States. Well, anyways, Akorn is trying to sell itself, and Fresenius says, okay, this looks like a good deal for us. It seems like Akorn has gotten a lot of drugs through as generics, and it would be a good company in our portfolio. So let's try and purchase Akorn. Well, Fresenius signs up this deal with Akorn. In the background of that, there's kind of some things going on at Akorn. When you are a generic drug manufacturer, you have to submit your approvals for your generics to the FDA. And the FDA will rely upon the data that the generic drug manufacturer submits to the FDA. And so the data that the generic manufacturer provides to the FDA is really important, and it needs to be clean when it's submitted to the FDA. Well, before this deal was signed and into this deal being signed, there's quite a large problem at Akorn as far as the data that's being provided to the FDA. Mark Silverberg is a gentleman that's in charge of this data and data integrity at Akorn. And it's pretty clear from this opinion and from the facts of this case that he wasn't doing a very good job, and neither was anyone on the team. They were essentially pushing through these generic drug applications to the FDA with kind of faulty data. And it's just not clean on Akorn's books when they're sending this data in. And so this is a large problem. The FDA basically rules with an iron fist on this type of stuff because there's a large amount of trust that's put into the generics. And so if it comes out that a generic's been lying or has bad data that they're sending to the FDA, that's quite problematic for that company. So that begins to come out after this deal is signed. It's existing before, but it comes to light while the deal is signed, and that's because there's a whistleblower that pings essentially the folks at Fresenius and says, hey, you got a problem here. There's a lot of data integrity issues at Akorn, and you should look into this. And so Fresenius hires a partner at Sidley Austin. That partner then looks into this and says, and ultimately finds, yeah, there's massive problems with the data integrity at Akorn. Now, alongside all of this, Akorn as a company is experiencing some very bad financial times. Their EBITDA is down like 80% year over year. These numbers are quite drastic. And that's largely attributed to some competitors that came into the market and were offering products at a better price than Akorn was. And we're beating them out essentially. And so that was hurting Akorn. And then Akorn lost a large contract. So those two factors essentially are responsible for the decline in Akorn's stock value. So you have the regulatory issue going on, and then you also have just the general state of Akorn is declining after this deal is signed up. And so if you're Fresenius, you're looking for a way to get out of this deal. And ultimately, they say that, one, there is a general material adverse effect that occurred between signing and closing, right? And so they should be able to get out of the deal. Two, Akorn violated the bring down conditions because it repped that it was free and in compliant with all FDA regulations. And so when it failed to actually be in compliance, well, then Akorn violated that condition to closing. And then third, Akorn didn't operate its business in the ordinary course of business in accordance with that covenant between signing and closing. And that, their argument is hinged upon, well, Akorn, after signing, basically damped down what little data integrity controls that it had in the first place. So Vice Chancellor Laster takes this in turn, what might be the longest court opinion that I've ever read, 247 pages. And so first, Vice Chancellor Laster says, we've got to look at whether there was a general material adverse event here. And he says, yes, there is. And this analysis just shows, and how long this opinion goes, shows that Vice Chancellor Laster knows that a material adverse event is hard to trigger under Delaware corporate law. And so possibly the reason why this opinion is so long is because he's trying to do a great job to justify that so that he doesn't get overturned on appeal. Essentially, he begins with the general framework of an MAE, which is that there's general economic events, so exogenous risks to the deal, and those are going to be attributed to the buyer. But when there's something that's endogenous to the company that impacts that company disproportionately, then that risk is going to be attributed to the seller, right? The seller is going to have to bear that risk. And so essentially what you're going through is, was there a material effect that was specific to Akorn that disproportionately affected Akorn compared to its peers? Vice Chancellor Laster says, yeah, almost certainly and clearly yes. Over 5 quarters, the company is down significantly. And he points to some numbers to kind of just ballpark. He kind of says if it's over 40%, there's a possibility that it's an MAE. Obviously facts could be different. He says that Chief Justice Strine found that there wasn't an MAE when it was in the 60%, but when you're over 40, you're looking like you're in MAE territory. And it's specific to Akorn. This wasn't just a general downturn in the pharmaceutical market. No, this was specific to Akorn. It was attributed to the increase in competitors, the loss of contracts, and basically the bad news about the deal, wherein people were hearing that Akorn had a lot of regulatory issues. And so Vice Chancellor Strine says, yes, there's a general MAE here. Second, he says that the Akorn violated the bring down condition. So Akorn repped that it was in compliance with all FDA regulations. Well, it wasn't, clearly. And so this gives Fresenius an out. He calls this the regulatory MAE, which seems a bit confusing because we're actually talking about the bring down condition, but you can refer to this as a regulatory MAE as well. He says we have to look at this to determine if it's a regulatory MAE by look at it qualitatively and quantitatively. So qualitatively, these were big time violations. Data integrity issues are taken very seriously by the FDA when it's generic drugs. And this was happening across multiple offices. There's multiple people that were investigating this. They even tried to conceal and cover up the problems after the fact. And these problems continued post-closing or post-signing, and then even well into the trial, there's more and more issues that are coming up. And then second, quantitatively, so the economic value of these violations we got to look at. Akorn says, well, it's only going to cost $44 million. Whereas Fresenius says, no, this impacts the value at $1.9 billion. Well, this deal altogether is worth $4.3 billion. So that seems like it's very material as far as the numbers go. And so ultimately, that's where Vice Chancellor Laster comes out, is that it was a violation. It was a regulatory MAE as well, violation of the bring down condition. And then finally, there's even a failure of ordinary course of business covenant. Akorn failed to comply with that covenant. And he points largely to the fact that Akorn, after it signed the deal, even loosened the reins on its regulatory oversight division, even more than what was already existing. And that is not something that a regular pharmaceutical company would do. If you're in the business of manufacturing generic drugs, well, then you're going to need to make sure that you have a good relationship with the FDA and you're not fudging the numbers and pushing things through. So ultimately, 3 ways that Fresenius could get out, any one of which would have been sufficient. But these 3 holes altogether, you could drive a truck through it. Drive out in your limousine, Fresenius, your Mercedes-Benz German limousine, because you are out of the deal, according to Vice Chancellor Laster. So thanks so much for watching this video. I think it's interesting. It's a very long opinion. It's probably worth reading if you're interested in MAEs to just kind of see how high of an impact on a specific company it needs to be to kind of break into MAE land. MAE land is not going to be something that's like a blink of an eye or something that's short. It's got to be something that's pretty serious, like a failure to maintain any data integrity when you're submitting generics to the FDA, or down 80% year over year in your company. Something that's quite specific to the company and quite bad. So those are the kind of things you're looking for in an MAE. I think this case does a nice job illuminating what an MAE might look like under Delaware law. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.